to St. Matthew, the 16th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
The word for today is discernment. Discernment. It means reading a situation or people correctly. For people like us, it means knowing where Jesus is, how he is active, and how he wants us to follow. Discernment. Discernment would come in handy for the disciples as they made their way with Jesus to a place called Caesarea Philippi. Here we are in Caesarea Philippi. Class is in session. And class, please remember your definition for the word discernment, because there is a lot to see and a lot to discern here in the city. Caesarea Philippi was located along a trade route between Damascus and Tyre and Sidon. A rich trade route it was that brought a lot of money and a lot of people to Caesarea Philippi, and a lot of ideas as well. Let's go downtown. And when we do, we'll see all of the tall buildings that the commerce that comes to that area has built. Wow, look at those tall buildings. Now, let's go out to the suburbs, where we'll see the mansions built by the people who work in those tall buildings. Look at those homes. What a place. What's God doing here? In order to answer that question, we can go outside of town just a little bit. It's just a little hike. Good for an afternoon and some fresh air, until we get to a certain cave where people have been going for centuries. The rumor is that there's some kind of spirit living deep within that cave, and if you worship it, you'll get something or other. Come and worship whatever is in that cave. Or, if you prefer your worship to be a little bit more specific, withdraw from the cave and take a look at what's next door. It's an old temple to the Greek god Pan, that lecherous god who never stops looking at the girls. Come and worship, if that's the kind of thing that you want to worship. Or, on our way back to town, there's that new temple that Herod the Great built to none other than Caesar Augustus. Come and worship. Worship Roman power and what it'll get you, if that is what you want to worship. So you can see that there's a lot to see and a lot to discern, a lot to figure out, a lot of ways to see where God might be and what kind of a God is doing things in old Caesarea Philippi. Against that background comes the impecunious and some say insignificant rabbi named Jesus of Nazareth with his disciples, and a request to do some discerning. Where is God? How is he active, and what does he want us to do as he follows? Jesus starts his lesson, his classroom, by asking people to discern God through the eyes of others, which is a very peculiar way to start. But start he does, and he says, "Who do others say that I am? Who's the Son of Man?" And they say, "Well, I don't know, maybe Elijah or Jeremiah, that prophet that complains all the time, although we're not saying you do, Jesus, not you. Or maybe even John the Baptist." But the problem is that all of those people are dead. And it seems that Jesus wants to know how God is active and how we can see him right now. So Jesus refines the question and says, "Who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am? How do you discern God right here and now?" And Peter gets it right. A+ for Peter. He moves to the head of the class. He's an example for all the other students. You are the Messiah. You're the Son of God. You're the one. Peter says, when it comes to discerning, knowing where God is and how I can find him, what he's doing, and how I should follow Jesus, you're it. And he's right. But the classroom is still open, and the lesson about discerning and discerning Christians like us, that's not over yet. Jesus has two more things to add. He tells Peter, "You've got the keys to the kingdom." Well, what does that mean? It means that what you bind here on earth is bound in heaven. Same thing. And what you loose here on earth is loosed in heaven. That's old religious language, and here's what it means, especially for discerning people like us. Loosing things on earth, well, let's start with binding. Binding things on earth means that if you see a sin, and you see someone sinning, then you have an obligation to hold that person accountable. And loosing means that you have the option, maybe the duty, to forgive. If you lose sins, you let them go. You stop holding on to them. They're gone. Now, a church wouldn't be much of a church if it tried to be a church without forgiving, would it? So those two gifts are very important. And how we discern God in the world is going to mean how we use those gifts of binding and loosing. It seems to me that Jesus is about not only people discerning him in Caesarea Philippi, but discerning him in all times and in all places. One of the places that I can think of this morning was the fellowship hall of my first parish in Illinois. One Saturday afternoon, it was absolutely crammed, every corner taken, with ladies who were having a great time. The tables were set for high tea. And the reason that they were there with their overpriced tickets was a fashion show and a luncheon. The tickets were overpriced, but nobody minded because it was for a good cause. The ladies were raising money for a special project. The fashion show went its course. They found a lady in the congregation who had actually been a fashion model at one point, and she hosted the show expertly. Everybody had a great time. But the greatest time of all was that they had discerned that God was at work in their midst. And that God was at work helping the ladies of the church to finance and remodel their kitchen. Everybody had it with the old kitchen, but they didn't know what to do. Jesus in a kitchen? I don't know. But the dinners were getting pretty shabby. And nobody wanted to work in that kitchen anymore, so the communion table still being what it was, the fellowship table was falling on hard times. And they decided that Jesus needed to be at that fellowship table and that he was leading them there. So they followed. New kitchen. Like I say, the old one was pretty bad. Hansel and Gretel would have meant, recognized the oven. And so the ladies started raising money. They did very well with their luncheon. That fall, they did a craft show right before Christmas. They did a garage sale in the spring. They did a couple of other things, and with some gifts of money besides, they found that by May, they had enough to start remodeling. The old appliances went, the old counters went, and the old cabinets too. An empty shell. New cabinets were delivered, new flooring, new countertops. All they needed was the appliances. So the night before the appliances were delivered, they decided, let's say they discerned, that the master final touch would be to re-wallpaper the kitchen. They ordered the wallpaper, and on a Friday night, they set to work. The ladies were there and their husbands, everybody working in concert, following directions, having a great time. Until about 9 o'clock, when the Bossy family from church came. They came right after dinner to see what was going on, because it was their duty and their role in the congregation to criticize everything. They did not disappoint that Friday night. They remarked that the wallpaper was crooked, that the pattern and the color were wrong for any kitchen, and that the people that were working hardest were doing it wrong. I kept wishing that they leave while they still had their lives. And they finally did. One of the ladies who had spearheaded the project and had the most invested got up from trimming wallpaper at the base, at the floor, and said what everybody else was thinking. Those people are not Christian, and they should be held accountable for what they said. It's not Christian. And I thought, a very good example of discernment in the area of binding sins. I don't think that that's what the other ladies were thinking, nor their husbands either. But that's what was going on. The fine act of discernment. Where is Jesus? How do you feel about this, and how does he want us to follow? So we kept working, matching pattern to pattern and wallpaper, and attending to seams and bubbles in the fabric and so on. And when we were finally done and cleaning up sticky hands and sticky brushes and getting ready to go home, the same lady went to the sink, cleaned her brush, and said, I know what I said about that family, and I think I was right. And I think that that's what God would say too. But you know what? Before I go home tonight, I need to say that I forgive them. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep. And you could hear the muttering of the others saying, yeah, we should forgive them. I forgive them too. It's just the way they are. Don't pay any attention. And that was the discernment of Lucy. loosing sins, letting them go. As we took a look at the final result of our wallpapering and saw how pattern was fit to pattern and seam to seam, and everything went perfectly, we were also about the business of fitting patterns of sinner to sinner, of loosing to loosing, and binding to binding, and stepping back and discerning once again that we had more than a kitchen.